Sometimes when you're dating someone, what happens is the person gets really close to you and you're very connected. And then after a couple months of this deep connection, you'll notice the person is pulling away from you. Almost like at times after the deepest connection, it's as if they saw a ghost or they got haunted or something happened to them. Many times this is due to an inability to express intimacy or a fear of intimacy. And you may not be able to rationalize this, or you ask yourself, what's a big deal? It feels good to be close to someone. It feels good to be connected to them. Yes, if you have a stable attachment, you had two loving parents you grew up with, and they were there to address your needs, to be there to work with you on difficult situations or whatever you had to do, then that is going to be true. The deeper the connection, the better you feel. But if you grew up in a chaotic home or with an anxious attacher who pursued and then let go, or an avoidant or dismissive attacher, someone who was aloof, you couldn't even get close to them, then when you attach deeply with someone, you end up waiting around for the next shoe to drop. You all of a sudden are put back into your past, that same past you grew up in as a child. So really, how we attach, how we feel about intimacy has everything to do with what happened in our child of origin. How did our parents connect with us? Were they there for us? Did they show up for us? Or did they neglect us? Did they come around sometimes and give us tons of gifts and then disappear? If you grew up with one of these less stable approaches, such as avoidant or anxious attachers, it's going to show up in your relationships. And when you start feeling very close to someone, you probably will go through a sense of a loss of some sort. So what kinds of things do make people, when they're afraid of intimacy, back away? Well, I think the first thing is they realize that there's a loss of identity when they do that. When they're close to someone, they start questioning, okay, who am I? Am I that kid from when I was growing up? Is this person going to drop me? Is this person going to, make me fall madly in love with them? And then all of a sudden I'm, I am with them forever for them to abuse or to treat how they want. And until you resolve those kinds of things, you are going to have a difficult time showing up for this person and really being there for them. Secondly, you may have a real fear. How you attached, how your parents attached may have created a fear in you. And if you have a fear, it could be that real love makes you vulnerable. When you really love someone, they have the power to hurt you. And most of us don't think about that. But if you grew up in a home where, you couldn't count on your parents, where they weren't always reliable, or where they may leave you and you may never see them again, you can see why that fear would be very real for you. They might, it might bring up this thing where you loved in the past and you got hurt. And you're recalling that because that wasn't completely resolved. Or it may look like a relationship can break your other attachments, such as, when you really get close to someone, you do kind of do a cleaning out of friends who are just on the peripheral and really deep friends. And the friends who are really deep, you'll still hold on to. But all those other friends that you counted on sometimes, you will lose those. In a real relationship, we start prioritizing our partner and we see less of those people. And whether you can admit it or not, when you start prioritizing a relationship, that is the first, big thing in your life. And if you get married, you do have to prioritize your spouse over your mom, over your dad, and over your siblings. They're first, and then your mom, and then your siblings. So it's important that you understand that. And I think people who are fearful of of any kind of intimacy really understand that. And third, next there's like love stirs up existential fears. Like if we get married and we have kids, my life will be half over. I mean, most of us don't take attachment that much apart. We don't think about how important it is to have intimacy in our life. But if you are afraid of intimacy, if you grew up in a family where you were vulnerable and hurt time after time, you are going to see these parts because it starts eliciting all these old memories. And unless you've resolved all those old things, which many of us have not, it's going to come back to haunt you in a relationship where you're really tight and close. And lastly, your identity is really challenged. Like, I can see very clearly that when I have clients in and they are very attached to someone and they have a fear of intimacy, they tell me many times, I've always prided myself on being on my own, on being able to, put up with people not always treating me, not always being there for me the way they should have. And I am a survivor. And now I'm intimately involved with this person. And so now I have to adapt the idea that together we're survivors. That's hard to get your head around, especially if you've been hurt by your attachments to people you loved in the past. What I can tell you is when you're in a relationship, and if this is your story and you start noticing this, you start having these triggers, it's really important that you identify that parts of you are not healed from the past. I'd encourage you to journal. I'd encourage you not only to journal, but to meditate on it, to really get into it. Think and recall the times you've invested in life and people that you loved have not come through, and then talk to someone about it. A very close friend, or, what I always recommend is a therapist or your reverend at church. Many times they have the idea that they bring in your faith, and that really does help you when you're going through a time like this. The worst thing you can do is give in to the fear and run away, because when you do that, you enable the fear to grow. It's like any other panic. If you don't do the hard thing, then you end up running away from it, and it strengthens. The hard thing gets stronger. It gets more limiting, and you could very well be one of those people that in later life you finally get the courage, but look all the years you missed when you may have wanted to raise a family, you may have wanted to go on great vacations. And it's not to say you can't do that when you get older, but many times life limits us when we get older. So it's much better if you stay in the present and take care of it today. If this video is helpful for you, I really appreciate you subscribing. And for all you who are already subscribers, thank you so much. You have my heart.